The day Pa risked everything and defied death to save a friend. The wind had a bite to it that morning, sharp enough to cut through even the thickest coat. Spring was supposed to be on its way, but out here on the prairie, the seasons didn't care what the calendar said. They came when they pleased and left when they wanted. And that day, the sky told us winter still had its grip. Low gray clouds pressed down over the land, heavy and brooding, while a restless wind swept across the open fields, carrying the smell of melting snow and cold river water. I was 12 years old then, and already I'd learned to read Pa's eyes better than most folks could read a book. Normally, they were calm, steady, like the slow stretch of the river in summer. But that morning, I caught something else in them, a kind of distant narrowing, like he was seeing farther than anyone else in the room. And whatever he saw, it wasn't good. Pa sat at the table, coffee cooling in his cup, his gaze fixed on the horizon through the frost glass window. Ma was at the stove, frying the last of the bacon we'd saved for Sunday breakfast, her apron sprinkled with flour from the biscuits rising in the oven. My little sister Annie was at the table, humming quietly while she braided her doll's hair with bits of ribbon Ma had let her keep from an old dress. It should have been a quiet morning, the kind you remember years later for its peace. But there was no peace in Pa's face. He set his mug down slow, pushed his chair back, and turned to Ma. "Mary," he said, "I need to ride into town." Ma didn't turn from the stove, but I saw her shoulders stiffen. "Eli, you promised me. You promised you'd stay off the river road." That promise wasn't just about a road. It was about the danger that came with it. Every spring, when the ice broke in the upper streams, the river swelled up like it was angry at the world. The banks softened, and one bad step could send a wagon tumbling into the current. Folks had died on that road. Pa had nearly been one of them the winter before. Pa stood there, his hands resting on the back of the chair. "I know I promised Mary, but Sam needs me." Sam Turner was Pa's oldest friend, more like a brother than a neighbor. They'd grown up together back in Kentucky, hunted their first deer side by side, and even courted their wives in the same summer before both deciding to try their luck out west. Ma finally turned from the stove, concerned. "What kind of trouble?" Pa's jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. "His youngest took sick in the night. Fever's bad. Doctor's in Clearwater, and the only way to get there before it's too late is the river road. If I take the long way, she won't make it." The kitchen went silent except for the hiss of bacon in the pan. Annie looked up, sensing something was wrong, but not understanding what. Ma's eyes softened, but her voice was tight. "Eli, you swore to me after last winter. You swore." "I did," Pa said, stepping closer, "and I meant it. But I also swore to stand by Sam. If it were Annie lying there, I'd want him to ride through fire if he had to." They stared at each other for a long time. Ma holding on to her fear, Pa holding on to his word. I think she knew in that moment she couldn't stop him. She put down the spatula. Sternly, "You come back to me, Eli Dawson, you hear?" He kissed her forehead, grabbed his coat, and was out the door before the bacon had cooled. The wind fought him all the way down the yard as he mounted his bay gelding, Jasper. I watched from the window, heart pounding. Even from inside, I could feel the weight of what he was riding into. I pictured that river road in my mind, the narrow bend where the bank sloped just enough to pull a wagon wheel into the current if you weren't careful. The way the ice would break loose in thick slabs, spinning downstream like blades. Ma worked in silence that morning, her eyes darting to the window more times than she probably realized. Annie asked where Pa was going, but Ma just said, softly, He's helping a friend. Pa told us later about the ride. The wind was cutting across the open prairie, slapping at his face until it burned. Snowmelt ran in thin streams down the slopes toward the river, making the ground slick under Jasper's hooves. Twice he nearly lost his seat when the horse stumbled in the mud. When he reached the bend in the river road, the water was higher than he'd ever seen it in spring. The current was thick with broken ice, chunks big enough to crush a wagon to splinters. Sam's place was on the far side, and there was no time to turn back. He drove Jasper forward, the horse's hooves splashing into icy water at the edge of the road. The first stretch held, but halfway across the bend, the bank gave way with a sound like tearing cloth. One wheel of Sam's wagon, loaded with the sick child and her mother, dropped straight into the water. The current yanked at it, jerking the whole rig sideways. Paul leapt from Jasper into the freezing shallows. The water hit him like a hammer, stealing his breath. Ice cut into his hands as he gripped the spokes, shoving with everything he had. The mud sucked at his boots, the current pulling him toward deeper water. Sam shouted for him to get clear, but Pa didn't stop. "You keep her warm," he yelled over the roar. "I'll get us out." With one last heave, the wheel caught solid ground. Pa scrambled back up, half numb, and swung into the saddle. The wagon creaked forward, out of the bend and onto higher ground. By the time they reached clear water, Pa's hands were bleeding, his coat soaked through. The doctor took one look at the little girl and pulled her inside. "Another hour," he told them later, "and you'd have been too late." When Pa came home that night, Ma didn't scold him. She just sat him down by the fire, wrapped his hands in clean cloth, and kept her eyes on the work. "I kept my promise, Mary," Pa said softly. She looked at him for a long moment and nodded. Both of them. Years later, I realized what that meant. Sometimes keeping your word will put you right in the path of danger, and sometimes love will pull you in two directions until you think you'll break. But a man of his word doesn't look for a way out. He looks for a way through. When Sam's daughter came to visit us years later, she was a grown woman with children of her own. She told us she wouldn't be alive if not for that ride. Pa just sipped his coffee, staring into the fire, but I saw in his eyes that he'd carried that day with him every step of his life. Next time, I'll tell you about the night the prairie caught fire and how we outran the flames with nothing but a wagon, a team of horses, and a prayer. It's a story of terror, courage, and the hand of God guiding us through the smoke. But that's a story for another fire. And if you enjoyed this one, there's a whole prairie full of stories waiting for you on this channel, from blizzards that nearly broke us to quiet acts of kindness that changed everything. Each tale carries a piece of frontier life and the faith that kept us standing. If you haven't yet heard the one about Ma facing down a starving coyote with nothing but a cast iron skillet, well, let's just say it's proof that courage doesn't always come with a rifle in hand. You can find it, along with all our other prairie stories, right here on the channel.